Should you be doing zone 2 endurance training or high intensity interval training as a female endurance athlete over the age of 45? If you've been following some of the well known figures or experts within the menopause training sphere, you might have heard that you should only be doing, or that you shouldn't be doing, any easy or long running, or what we often refer to as zone 2, and that you should only be doing HIIT training or high intensity interval work. Today, Nikki and I are going to do a deep dive into the science of this and what you really should be doing to ensure improvements and longevity in running during this phase of life. And so, as always, welcome back to the She Runs Strong podcast powered by Coach Perry with Nikki and Shona. As always, I've got my co-host and colleague, Nikki, who, interestingly, Nikki, enough, you were telling me you ran your first marathon 16 years ago. That's correct, right? And your first 10K was dare I say it, 28 years ago, you said? That's correct?
Yeah, you're completely aging me. Yes, hello. So, 16 years ago, I ran my first marathon. That just feels like a lifetime ago. London Marathon it was. That was fabulous, and I absolutely love London. And then 28 years ago, I ran a 10K. Gosh, I was in my 20s. I was playing a lot of hockey and rugby at the time, and we just went and ran a 10K. So, and that just really, I mean, I always knew at school that I was going to run marathons, but I just loved it. How long ago was it since? When
Yeah,
was your?
I come from a football or soccer background, so same thing. I ran a couple of 5Ks and 10Ks. Oh gosh, that must have been 18 years ago, perhaps. Yeah. And then, but obviously just more football orientated, and footballers hate running, right? So, and then my first marathon would have been 2015. And then I think I did a half Ironman before my marathon, if I'm not, yes. Yeah. So yeah, but in and around that sort of time. So it's been a decent amount of time. And I mean, they just catch you, right? You get going on them, and then it becomes such a lifestyle, which I love.
Well, the whole of endurance sport. I mean, I did Ironman, I think about 11 years ago, and I just loved the whole being in endurance and just that long haul of long running, long cycling, and everything about it. I just, really, really loved it. I did do a bit of team sports as well with hockey and rugby, like yourself with football, but I just love this sort of long haul stuff. So it's just great. But anyway, but we're looking at endurance training today, zone 2s and high intensity training. And so before we just start, just in terms of looking at that, maybe we should define exactly what we mean with zone 2 and with HIIT training. So maybe we could start with zone 2 and just a sort of how we're going to define that today.
Perfect. I mean, both of these are buzzwords, and we'll move into that in a bit, Nikki. But zone 2 really is the buzzword. But aerobic capacity training, there's so many different names for that, I guess. But it's really where you'd be working or running or training at 75 to pushing 85% of your threshold, okay, or 60 to 70% of your maximum, right? And as we are aging,
Heart rate,
heart rate. Yes.
Yes.
Apologies. Thank you. And as we're aging, we try to stay away from maximum heart rate, because we know that those numbers are changing, and we prefer to use something like a threshold heart rate or a threshold pace even as well. So, and that is really what we consider our easy and our long runs. Like you were mentioning, you really enjoyed those long runs going into Ironman training and in marathon training, and they form the foundation of endurance training. Okay, so that's really zone 2 and endurance training. HIIT training. Sorry, Nikki, anything you want to add on that endurance?
Yeah, I mean, just you're talking about you're talking about that sort of threshold heart rate and stuff. Maybe just a little bit more explanation just with that. So you're saying it's a percentage of your threshold heart rate, and just what is your threshold heart rate, and then what is the kind of percentage? Just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you.
Would be good there.
So threshold, really, we're looking to, and it's come from a long sort of line of how we tested it. I don't really want to go into the whole history of that, but essentially we're looking for a hard, sustained effort between 30 and 40 minutes. Okay, that is what we're looking at. That is then regarded as your threshold. Okay, whether it's threshold heart rate or threshold pace, over the 30 to 40 minutes. And again, it needs, as I repeat, a hard, sustained effort. So it's as hard as you can go for that amount of time. So you don't want to start nice and easy and speed up, and you equally don't want to go too hard and die a slow death for that entire time. And so very often we use a time trial for this. So depending on your level, you might use a 5K time trial. If you are a much faster runner, you might use a bit more of a 8K or a 10K time trial, just depending to get that 30 to 40 minutes sort of effort. And then from there, so let's take heart rate as an example. If over that threshold test or time trial, your average heart rate for that time was, let's call it 166, you would then take 75% to 85% of that 166, and that would essentially give you your zone 2, what we would regard as your endurance zone for training. And similarly from a pace perspective as well. So yeah, that's how we work out zone 2 specifically.
And just to add on to that, because I know you always say this, and we do, heart rate strap, not just using the watch. So just use that strap to get the accurate of readings for your heart rate there. But it's a big range, that zone 2, really. I mean, it's a big chunky range.
It really, really is. And that's why I say 75 to 85%, but I think 85% is pushing it a little bit. I quite like to sit between 75 and 82%. So I think that's good. And I think the thing here is go and do this exercise for yourself. Like go and run a time trial, wear your chest strap, check your heart rate, and then work out your zone 2 based on that 75 to 82%. And you're going to be shocked as how, and I don't want to say the word how slow, because when I say the word slow, people close their ears about this, but it is so much slower than what you would regard for your slow runs anyways. It really is. And it's a big mistake that we see most endurance runners making, male, female, old, young, is that they're not running these runs easy enough. And that's really why I think the zone 2 sort of thing has become quite popular at the moment, but I'm jumping ahead of that. So we'll dive into some of that in a bit. But yes, it is a large range, and really, again, I was about to jump into another part of it as a physiology, but yes, we'll dive into that as we go, carrying on into this.
So,
to physiology as well.
Defining HIIT then, and with respect to zone 2, what's that all about?
Yeah, and this is the thing, Nikki, is that the true definition of high intensity interval training within the scientific literature is regarded when we're talking about running, cycling, on a rowing ergometer, on an arm ergometer. It's when you're doing, for lack of a better word, cardio or aerobic exercise. And it's really, by definition, is when you're working at around 85 to 90% of your VO2 max or of your maximum sprinting speed. Okay, so you can see how if you are on Instagram and what you would have known as your definition of HIITs, it is not that at all. Instagram and influencers and so on have taken HIITs and what we know is high intensity training and just stolen the word HIIT and applied it to that. So, I think that definition's been skewed slightly. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think we use those terms interchangeably now. And I think really, I do believe that you can do high intensity training within a gym situation, within a strength situation where you're perhaps doing a circuit of 5 different exercises with a 1-to-1 rest ratio. So 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, which is going to be high intensity. That, of course, is not what we're talking about when we're talking about endurance training. But if you want to speak specifically around high intensity interval training, we're speaking about running at about 80 to 90% of your VO2 max or of your maximum speed. Okay, so it's not your maximum; it's around 85 to 90% of that.
And that is different from your threshold heart rate.
Definitely, and that is different from your, and again, this is part of what we're talking about when we're talking running. All these different high intensity sessions, it's not just the HIITs, the sort of work that we do. We have tempo, we have steady states, and all of those are at different percentages of your threshold or of your heart rate. Okay, so I think that's a key thing just to note, because when you're on Instagram and someone's telling you that as a menopausal female runner, you have to only be doing HIITs, we need to define what that is, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
so yeah, we'll go. Yeah, we're going to go into a little bit of that now. And Nikki, I mean, yeah, I mean, we were talking a bit about it. Like, why do you think this movement? Let me put it against Zone 2 at the moment. Why? They're both popular, but like, why is Zone 2 got such a negative connotation? Do you think?
Oh, that's it. So I think from what we see or what I hear a lot is most runners, they just feel that running. I don't like you saying running slow. I
So yeah,
like it rephrased as running easy, but the running slow makes them slow. And I think you'll have heard that plenty as well. And we get it a lot in the forum that we're just practicing running slow, so they're going to get slower. And I think that is it's a tough pill to swallow, isn't it? To believe that
yeah.
running slow will actually make you faster. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, I agree with you. I think it comes from a little bit also of this bit of old school sort of thought of no pain, no gain, right? So if you're not nearly vomiting at the end of your session, you haven't worked hard enough, and you haven't gained anything. I think that's the part of it is like if you're not sweating and really like killing yourself, you're not getting any benefit, which we know isn't completely true. And I think I think why HIIT has maybe become popular, and in particular in and amongst the menopausal training sphere, is really because um, the it's sort of spoken that there is an apparent helping of the change in hormones that you do tend to become quite insulin resistant as we age. There's a lot more of that visceral fat that happens, and there is a little bit of evidence to show that high intensity interval training can apparently help that and balance out that or lower that insulin resistance a little bit. um, there are definite benefits of HIIT training to neuromuscular, to improving VO2 max. It does improve your overall ability and speed, but I think it's generally one is becoming more popular than the other just because people enjoy we do enjoy running fast as well. Like that's
yes.
it's something that we do. People don't enjoy running slow, but I think if they understood the mechanisms and the physiology, they would start seeing some of those benefits
Yeah.
a little bit
I mean,
more.
those are quite big words you've used there as well with neuromuscular benefits. What are we
Yeah,
trying to
sorry. Let me
say?
let me let me let me break
Yeah.
that down. Thanks, Nikki. So neuromuscular, right? So the connection from your brain down to your muscles, right? That's how we move. That's how our muscles contract. And as we get older, those neuromuscular pathways, so the pathways from the brain to the muscles, are the things that are declining, parts of that
Getting
aging
slower.
decline, and getting slower. And really, it starts in the extremities. So it's your hands and your feet. That's why there's a high risk of falling as we get older because of that neuromuscular change. And so the high intensity work does help with that. It helps keeping those pathways reinforced. I mean, think about it like a river, and if
Yeah.
you have a river and that river runs dry and we're not using it anymore, eventually that pathway is just going to stop. But if we keep that pathway going, if we keep that river flowing, that connection between the brain and the muscles is still going to happen. So there are some benefits definitely to HIIT. I just think that I think as
Sure,
humans, we
sure.
just love a buzzword as well, right? We love
Yeah,
we
yeah.
love
So
so Zone 2 in itself is a buzzword,
oh, it
anyways, as
very
well.
much is.
Yeah.
So then you've
Mm.
also gone on to say improvements in VO2 max. So do we want to
Yeah,
define those
yeah.
a little
Should
more?
we? Can I go? Do you want to do? We can do benefits of both. So if we go
Yeah.
into the physiology of HIIT and Zone 2, so
Yes,
to
that'd be
really
great.
dive into some of those, I think that's going to be important. So okay, let's take Zone 2 first. So if you're running, okay, essentially our physiology works. We have three main um energy
Energy.
systems. Yeah, and they don't work in isolation. So I think that's a key thing is everyone thinks it's like a switch. We flick from one to the other. Like now we're in our fat burning zone, which I hate that word anyways, but now we're in our aerobic capacity zone, and now we're working anaerobically, and it doesn't always work like that. You do predominantly use one system more than the other, okay, but they are all working all the time, okay. But when we are training in this endurance zone or this Zone 2, what is essentially happening is that it is predominantly aerobic. Okay, so it's predominantly what we call it the endurance zone. And what happens there is we just tend to become more efficient at different cellular respirations. And what I mean by that is we breathe oxygen in, where it goes into the lungs. From the lungs, it goes into the alveoli, which spread the oxygen into the bloodstream. The oxygen that gets grabbed by hemoglobin goes into the cells, travels down to the muscles. The muscles then take that oxygen and it goes into there, and that's how we get energy, is within the cell. And then while this is happening as well, while we're training in this zone, we're creating more of what we call mitochondria. Mitochondria are essentially the powerhouse of the cell. That's where the energy comes from or happens. So while we're training in this zone, there's more mitochondria that happen. And so we get more power. So think about you building more coal stations, essentially. I know that's a bad example. We're trying to move away from coal, but you get my points. And again, while we're training in this zone, we're teaching our body to then also become far more efficient at getting rid of the waste of that cellular respiration. So when we create energy within the cells, there's a waste product that comes from that. So we have to get rid of that. Okay. And so we become more efficient at taking that waste out of the cells, and it comes out as carbon dioxide. Okay. So that's the exercise physiology 101 done in 2 minutes. All right. And so when we train in that zone 2, we're allowing ourselves to become more efficient and create more mitochondria. And as we mentioned earlier, as Nikki mentioned, that zone is quite large. And so you could train in that zone, and particularly at the slightly slower end. Again, we want to use the word easier, not slower there, and get the exact same benefits as if you're training on the slightly faster end of that zone. And the reason for that is because of the way our muscles contract. So again, quick physiology lesson here with that. As we're pushing off the ground, our muscle fibers are coming together and we're getting a really strong contraction. Every time we land on the ground, so every time you run, you push off, you land, you push off, you land. Every time you land on the ground, that's a shock absorbing. And the muscle fibers are pulling apart. They're still contracting. Your muscles are still contracting, but the fibers are pulling apart. So you can see that's a lot, I wouldn't say weaker, but it's susceptible to a lot more damage. And obviously, the faster we run, the more that happens, and those eccentric contractions are happening. And so by allowing ourselves to run easy enough, you're going to get the benefits, but at less expense to your body. All right. So that's the zone 2 aspect of how it helps us become better runners, fitter runners, faster runners, because we land up building our engine. The high intensity interval training, or any kind of high intensity work and training that we do, a couple of benefits that it has: it helps increase your muscle fiber recruitment, because now, if you just think about that, we have to recruit more muscle fibers because we're asking our body to run a little bit faster. So we're doing that. This doesn't always happen, because whether you are fast twitch or endurance twitch or slow twitch muscles is partly genetic, but you can convert some muscle fibers from being slow twitch to fast twitch. So that just says whether you're more endurance orientated or sprint orientated. We do see a slight increase in mitochondria with high intensity work. There's more capillary density, so we're getting more blood out to the muscles. And then there's an increase in lactate production. Okay. And our lactate isn't the baddie that we want it to have, or that we think it is, right? We always think it's the thing that causes you to get stiff, and it's not. Lactate actually can get utilized back in the cell as a fuel source. So as much as glucose gets utilized in the cell, so can lactate. And by doing this high intensity work, we see an increase in lactate. But the key thing here, guys, and this is a really, really key point, is that your lactate shuttle, it's called, so the lactate going as a source coming out and then going back in, is only as effective as the size of your aerobic capacity. So think about this lactate shuttle. See, I even call it a shuttle. It's a lactate shuttle as a bus, okay?
Yes.
And essentially, all the lactate gets onto the bus, but your bus is your aerobic capacity. So the bigger your bus is, the bigger your aerobic capacity is, the more lactate it could shuttle around to be reutilized. If you have a poor aerobic capacity, you won't be able to utilize or work at a very high intensity for very long. So I hope that analogy makes a little bit of sense. But that gives you the benefits of both zone 2 and HIIT training. So sorry, Nikki, I know there was a lot in there.
Yes. But, I love that analogy of the bus. And you're right, there is a lot in there. Yes. So zone 2, building mitochondria, and you can build some zone mitochondria in HIIT, but really you're just, and is that your bus, or is it just, I mean,
your zone 2 is the bus. So the zone 2 is building you're making a bigger bus with zone 2. So you're building a bigger bus with more seats, and the high intensity work will help you make more lactate production and efficiency, and will then allow those lactate to sit on the bus to get reutilized, as an example. So the bigger bus you have, which we get in zone 2, the more we're able to then work at a higher intensity, so get more seats on the bus, if that makes sense.
So you're always going to be a little bit limited in your HIIT workouts if your bus isn't a double-decker big.
And it's a smart car. Yes, exactly. If it's a smart car, then it's it only seats 2 people. Yes,
so we're
exactly.
looking for that big bus, even going on a train. Yes. I really like that analogy. That's really good. Hopefully that gives you a really good visual of what you need to do.
Exactly. And Nikki, I think this, begs the question then, is one more important than the other? And I just think it's, Go ahead.
For those, because I have a lot of friends who do run quite fast and stuff, and yet they still seem to make some gains, and so they often do those running fast and interval workouts and stuff, and I often think, well, maybe I should just do that. So why is there kind of risks there, or what's that sort of, can we? I mean, you're saying we definitely need that bus. So we know that now. You've explained the physiology and stuff. But can we build a bit of a bus with some HIIT, or
definitely, absolutely? No, definitely. So some of the benefits of HIIT training are, increased muscle fiber recruitment. The studies show improvements in VO2 max by doing just HIIT training. Okay, so a lot of the studies do show that. There's many studies that have endurance training and HIIT training, and over a 6 to 8 week period, and the HIIT training shows massive improvements in VO2 max, in endurance capacity, in all of these things. So it is very important. But Steve Magnus, who's anyone who knows, has been following some of his work. I mean, he's an excellent coach and runs some great podcasts and books and so on as well. Exercise physiologist. And so he actually made a really good point about these studies, though, because most of these studies are run over a 6 to 8 week period. That's their intervention period is only 6 to 8 weeks. It's not that long, because people, when it comes to research often does have limitations in that we don't always have the time to keep people in a study for 12 to 6 months, or 6 to 12 months or something, so we run it for 6 to 8 weeks because that's when we know we can see a physiological change. That's why we do it for that amount of time. That's the minimum amount of time. But his point is quite key in that if we ran those studies for 8 to 12 weeks, 12 to 16 weeks, we really do believe that we'd start seeing injuries happening within that high intensity group. And actually what he showed as well is that the endurance training group, even though the HIIT group improved quicker, the endurance training group improved longer. So it was like playing the long game. They still improved, and they were able to hold that improvements, keep that bus big for much longer. So it's almost like the HIIT group built a biggish bus, but it broke down halfway on the road. And the endurance training group had a bus that was slowish, but it kept going, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I think the HIIT training does come with an inherent risk, Nikki. And especially as we're aging, and we've had a conversation around the inherent injury risk for females in menopause. We had that discussion with Kelly. So guys, go back and look at that. And so if we are putting more load from high intensity work, you are putting yourself at a higher injury risk for which gain, whereas you could get a bigger bus doing endurance training for much longer, perhaps.
Yeah. And we do see this quite a bit in the forum, or with our runners, or the folks that we train, and folks, those who can keep showing up and getting those good endurance long runs in, do overall make good gains when they kind of do their intensities or their races and stuff. So we have seen this. That's really interesting that the study from Steve doesn't take into a bit longer across a sort of 6 months or a year and stuff, just to sort of see, and maybe they were all injured after 8 weeks.
Exactly. Look, to be fair, it's not his study. He just referred to a study, but that's what he was saying is But again, that's where research has its limitations, So we know though that too much high intensity work will cause injuries. Well, it doesn't cause injuries. Sorry, let me change that. Has a higher risk of injuries. So we do know that, and there is far less risk for doing zone 2 work. It's easy running. It's again, not to say that there's no risk. There's less risk, because if you do too much running, you also stand a chance of getting injured. And so we'll finish off the call by giving you the answer as to how much. But yeah, I think, Nikki, obviously I've been speaking running here, but your experience, I know you've taken up a bit of rowing of late. I know you've done an Ironman. I've only done half. I say only done half Ironmans. I hate saying that, but so this surely is different, in your opinion, with other sports that maybe aren't as loading running.
I've always said that I say a lot to my runners, running is a really hard sport, and to go into intervals and harder sessions, you have to be really ready and conditioned for that. And by that, I often mean having a lot of easy running and zone 2 work. When you move into triathlon, which is one of my other loves, and I've more recently taken up rowing, when you come to swimming and cycling, it's just that little bit easier to go into that higher intensity, raising your heart rate a little bit more, because you're not impacting. And I think that's going back to where you're talking about the loading on your muscles as you're hitting the ground and those weak spots. And you just don't get that in the same way, which is why you often see with swimmers, they do quite a lot of threshold work all the time and very little recovery. And the same with rowing. I did a rowing high intensity session last week, and actually, I felt great afterwards. Whereas if I do a high intensity run session, it takes a little bit longer to recover. And it was a very similar session to a run session, in terms of timings and intervals. But so I think there's different ways you can do high intensity sessions that are maybe safer. So you can maybe do a little bit more in a week, maybe. But that would be something like spinning, swimming, rowing. But when it comes to running, that big aerobic engine, the sort of the strength in your muscles, I think you'll love that, is a really important bit with the running as well, because of that loading aspect. And I think that easy running is just a big, big win. And we see it.
Sorry, you finish.
I was going to say, we see it a lot with runners, those that turn up year in, year out, month in, month out, week in, week out. After a good few years, they're going great guns, really. And it's not that one hit workout. It's not.
Exactly. But this is what worries me about, when you talk about running. Running is hard.
It's such a hard sport.
This impact, this constant impact. I know everyone thinks running is easy, but it speaks to anyone who starts running from scratch. They will tell you that it's terrible, right? They hate it. It's hard work and obviously that's a whole other conversation, but it is hard. And this is what worries me about when people are getting advice to only do high intensity interval training for running, and some of the advice I've seen is no endurance work, that females over the age of 45 should only be doing HIIT running. And it worries me when we're getting that kind of information. One, I don't think that anyone should have a blanket approach of this is the only type of training you should do. That I think is dangerous. But I think, it does give me cause for concern. And I think utilizing, like you're saying, triathlon or cycling and swimming and rowing and other aspects, I think are such a nice way. And we do it at Coach Perry by adding in a high intensity strength session, so that you're getting in your high intensity running session, but then you're also getting a high intensity strength session, so that you're not just getting that combat on the road or impacts on the road. You're also then building bones and muscles and trying to get some of that hormonal benefit with the insulin resistance, and reducing that from perhaps doing an extra strength session as well.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That leads us nicely on to next. I was going to ask, so what do we need to be doing then? What is a good structure for us? Because it sounds like we do need HIIT and we do need zone 2, and You know, we need variety, but we can't do everything. So what should we be doing?
If you want to recover from sessions faster, not feel tired all the time, run pain and injury free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join me in my upcoming training specifically for female runners over the age of 45. In it, I'll share with you my simple 5-step framework that'll transform your running. Simply scan the QR code on screen now or click on the link in the description to save your seats in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there. What do we do? I mean, so we at Coach Perry, we believe in a polarized view of training. So that is essentially 80-20 is also the fad word, or the zone sort of word for that is so 80% of your training, long, slow, easy runs, 20% of your training, higher intensity, HIIT orientated work. Of course, there's a caveat always. It always depends. It depends on your level and your ability and how long you've been running for and where you're coming from. And that might change a bit in the beginning to be 90% easy, 10% high intensity. And that just, that scale or that spectrum will move, as we go along. I do think we need to have some elements of high intensity work in our training. We've done episodes before, Nikki, on the use of strides, and how effective those are at starting. If you're new to running and you've never done high intensity work, don't just go out there and run at 90% of your VO2 max. You're going to hurt yourself, So utilize something like strides. I know, you recommend strides very often as a starting point, right?
Always. I love strides, and it's a great way because I think those folks who really find running easy, slow runs frustrating, if you pop some strides in 6 to 8 times 30 seconds, it gives a wee bit of a focus to the run, a bit of structure, a bit of excitement, for want of a better word. And then, but they're still doing their easy runs easy. And the cost, which you were talking about earlier, the cost to your body is really, really minimal, but it gets that nice leg turnover and works on run economy and everything.
Nikki, before we go on, can you just explain, just in case someone is new with our podcast, just you say 30 seconds, but explain how they do strides. Just if we
strides are just they can be done on many different levels, but they aren't sprints. They are just practicing your faster running. So it doesn't even need to be that fast if you don't want it to be fast. But I would say you're just looking to really get your leg turnover. So kind of pick either do about 30 seconds or maybe about 100 meters roughly. You can, if you're running on the roads, you could maybe go from lamppost to lamppost. If you've got a track, 100 meters is great, or just somewhere that you can just nicely measure out 20 to 30 seconds and just pick up the pace, control your acceleration, glide into your nice fast pace, and then control your deceleration going down. And it just gets your heart pumping a little bit more, gets your leg turnover a little bit lighter, a bit lighter on your feet, and just gets you running faster.
Yes.
You could start by just having pace lifts where you're just going, if you're new to running, you could just lift the pace up a little bit, come down. I do see people, and it does make me chuckle, who just go out the gates really fast and it's like a sprint. But the mechanics of running, sprinting are really very different from the running that we're looking for. So really try and keep the control of the acceleration, and it should feel like a lovely cruisy fast run, and you should look good running fast. And if you are new to strides, I would just do 4 in an easy run, 4 by 30 seconds, and then next week 6 by 30 seconds, and the week after 8 by 30 seconds, and that will just give you a little bit of stimulus there.
Exactly. That's a great way. Sorry, Nikki, that's a great, when I was speaking about that neuromuscular connection or improvements. I mean, strides are amazing for that, because let me just explain that mechanism. You're telling your brain that we want to go a little bit faster. So you're increasing your stride length, right? You need to go a little bit faster. So we need to recruit more muscle fibers to go a little bit faster. So we're getting more neuromuscular connection, more muscle fibers, more capillaries, more blood and oxygen being transported. And that's why those are effective. And so a great way to start, and then, to then build up to perhaps, some more higher intensity actual HIIT training or specific intervals or steady state tempos. All of those are obviously a very different conversation as well.
Yeah, they're great to add into your easy runs. And I think it's a really interesting subject, because, for women, we have a variety of women on our forum, and, some are on for health reasons. And so finding that nice balance in later life between zone 2 and HIIT is a great way to really bring health and wellness into your life. But we also have runners who are running ultras and comrades and doing these nutty long ultra runs, and then the focus really has to be, they have to train for that in the zone 2, and yes, that might not be a great thing in terms of overall health, because it is a lot of time on feet and it is hard and stuff, but they still need, well, I think they still need that HIIT. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think they definitely need the HIIT aspect to that, because that's one of the reasons why people don't like this zone 2, right? Because they believe that we're telling them that they're only running slow, and that if they run slow, they're going to get slower, which isn't true. The physiology, as you run slow, as I mentioned, your bus gets bigger. But we do need aspects of that HIIT element in there as well, because that does help with some aspects of speed and getting a little bit faster. And again, like I mentioned, the health benefits of recruiting more neuromuscular fibers or neural pathways and so on. So I definitely, of course, and again, that's where that 80-20 is so important, right? We want to make sure that we're 80% endurance. We're talking about endurance running here. I mean, perhaps if you're a tennis player or a hockey player, you probably your body will allow itself to do a little bit more high intensity running, because you don't have the volume that perhaps a comrades runner is doing. So those are elements that we just, we need to take into play. And the endurance running, yes, you mentioned around from a health benefit. And I think that's why a lot of these other people who are talking in the menopause sort of sphere are saying don't do it, is because they say, oh, it's bad for you. But it's only bad for you if your body's not equipped to do it. So
Yeah.
that's where I often say that let's rather have a massive strength focus so that we're able to sustain the endurance running and the high intensity running. In my opinion, if there's a runner who's doing 4 to 5 HIIT sessions a week and no endurance, I would put good money that runner is going to get injured. So yeah, I think even if they are doing strength work, so I still just think we have to have strength as a focus. I don't believe we should have a one theory of training works for this type of person or these people or people going through menopause. I think that the benefits is in both and definitely in strength work as well.
Yeah. So basically 80-20 for zone 2 and HIIT and strength training to complement the impact and strengthen you for the running.
Absolutely. And just to maybe echo your point earlier on the triathlon and rowing, is can also then, if you, depending on who you are, and you're adding in a cross training session where you're doing your high intensity work on a bike, on the rowing ergo, in the pool,
Yes.
so you're getting that physiological hormonal benefit, but not at the cost to your body that you would with running. So, and as I mentioned, that's what we do with our extra strength session. But yes, you could look to do that in a cross training session as well.
I love that. There's a lot in there, right? There's a lot for folks to digest, but yes, I'm sure we'll come back to this again and again as we go through these podcasts. But I love that. That was great explanation of all that stuff there. Thank you very much, Shona.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. And I'm super keen to hear read everyone's comments. I mean, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked for you, what you're trying. Drop us a comment in this comment section below and let us know.
Yeah, we'd love to hear. Yeah, definitely. Good stuff. Excellent.
All right. Yeah, we'll see you guys all again next week anyways as well. Nikki, thank you so much for your time as well. And
cheers.
we'll see you
Yes.
next week.
Goodbye, folks. Cheers.